And we're live.
Thank you. I was waiting for the drum roll then. Okay, good morning. Welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for Tuesday, the 21st of September 2021. The Scrutiny Committee is being conducted remotely in accordance with the coronavirus regulations and remote meetings protocol agreed by the Council alongside its standing orders, and acts in a democratic and transparent way. Can I remind members that this meeting is being live streamed to the public? And can I request that you switch your cameras off and mute your microphones, please, when you are not speaking, to ensure unnecessary background noise, and it will help. Also, we must note that standing orders and code of conduct will apply at all times during this virtual meeting, and we must all, as we always do, conduct ourselves accordingly. And also remind members to ensure the chat function is switched on and that they use the facility to indicate to me when they wish to speak on a particular item. Do not speak until you are invited to do so. For the benefit of all those 5 people watching on live stream, when I invite members to cast their votes on any particular item, they vote electronically and their votes are then counted up, but we do not identify who voted which way. Okay, as well as the live broadcast, a recorded version of the remote meeting will be uploaded onto the Council's website for public viewing as soon as possible after the meeting. Welsh translations can be provided upon request, and the images and sounds recordings may also be used for training purposes within the Council. Thank you. Okay. Apologies for absence, please.
We have an apology from Councillor Laura Lacey just for absence at the start of the meeting.
And can we also note that Councillor Stephen, what's your name, Stephen? I can't tell you. Stephen Marshall has issues with his internet connections, and so may be coming in and coming out and expressing his comments in the chat room. Can I ask all those who haven't turned off their cameras to turn them off now, please? Make sure everything is muted. Thank you. Okay, right, here we go. Declarations of interest. Does anybody have any now, or do they want to declare later on if they find that they do have any? Okay, the next thing is the minutes of the previous meeting on pages 3 to 10. I'm going to go through this quite slowly, but please stop me for accuracy recording. Okay, on page 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, you think there, and 7 and 8 and 9. Do we agree that they are a true reflection of what took place during that committee meeting of the 22nd of June?
Yes, Chair, thank you.
And is there a seconder?
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any matters arising from those minutes? I'll take that as no.
Chair, it's Councillor Marshall. I don't know if there was anything about the responses to some of the points raised at the bottom of the minutes. One of the things was, I know one of your questions about the youth council, etc. So it's just to basically find out. I haven't received anything that I've seen, and I'm normally quite good on email. So it's just a request for that. If it was sent out, can I have one? If not, can we obviously have answers? Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. We have not received anything from the Youth Council, except that is the report today, and I was going to raise this issue within that report. But can we note that, please? And
Chair, I'd like to speak on the Youth Council later.
yes, by all means, when we get this, you will be like everyone else. Okay, thank you. Neil, can you note that? Or sorry, Connor.
Yeah, I'll get that response sent to you as soon as possible.
And can we send it to not just me, but to all the committee, please?
Of course, yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, we now move on to item 4, which is pages 11 to 30, which is the in-house children residential care. Okay, thank you. And we go, there we are on page 15. Page 16. Hello there. How are you? Do you want to introduce this?
I can do, if that would be helpful.
Well, do you know what? I was looking for that, and I couldn't see who was introducing. I said, okay, I've read it. It's a lovely report. Yes, please do.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you, Chair. So I think I know everybody is here today. So I'm Sally Jenkins, I'm Head of Children's Services, and with me today, Joe Llewellyn and Scott Hereford. Joe prepared the bulk of the report that you've had the opportunity to read. This is very much putting before you today an information report about children's residential care, because in discussion with scrutiny officers and with some members, we were really conscious that we hadn't done this for some time, and it felt like a really important element of our work to share with yourselves. I think, as many of you will be aware from historically having visited our children's homes and so on, we have had over a number of years a portfolio of children's homes. And unlike many local authorities, we have maintained our own children's homes, albeit at a reduced number over a period of years. What this report outlines is the current position, but also some of the steps that we're taking forward into the future. And I hope what that you can see within the report is very much a sense of really building on a secure past in Newport in children's social care and residential care, and absolutely committing to providing really good quality children's residential care within our own city for our own children. I think all will be aware that there is a very long history of children having to leave their home authorities, often going hundreds of miles for alternative care. And quite apart from the cost, the quality of that care often leaves a great deal to be desired. So in pursuing this initiative, what we're trying to do is address what is a national shortage of care, to ensure that Newport children remain in our care, and to keep them as close to home as possible. These are our children. They'll come back to live in Newport at some point. Their families are here, their friends are here. And very often by keeping them here, we're able to maintain those links so that as they go into adulthood, they've still got that important family web around them. The children that we care for in our children's homes are some of the most vulnerable. And I think in some ways that places I don't know about greater, because it's always a huge duty on us to ensure that our children are well cared for. But I think what you can see from the report, there's some real thought gone into the closure of Cambridge House, which on the surface is, well, why would you do that? Why would you close that resource? But that's because it doesn't meet what we need in terms of quality for our children. We're very happy, the three of us, to take any questions that you might have this morning on the basis of the report, or anything else you think we might be able to answer in children's residential care. I think from our perspective, we would like to thank the commitment of the council to this arena of work. because what we see in other local authorities is there hasn't been the same sort of commitment and over many years, and that leaves them in a position where their numbers of children in out of authority residential care continues to increase, whereas ours is decreasing. And where also, certainly during the past 18 months of the pandemic and going forward, what we've seen is huge pressure in placements. We do have pressure on placements, but it is at least to some degree ameliorated by our own in-house residential care. So Jo and Scott are both here on the call, so the three of us are really happy to take any questions or any comments from any of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for those words. Does anybody have any questions to raise on the report or the information report?
We've got Councillor Paul Cochrane up first.
Okay, Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sally, for introducing it. I just like to mention one or two things, actually, to be perfectly honest. It's I think it's about 30 plus years that I've been on the local authority, and I'll say plus, I won't give you the total number, but I think this is one of the most rewarding schemes I've been involved in, to be honest, through all that period of time. I think if you look at the report, some of the areas, it's absolutely superb what we've achieved. That's all down to partnership working between members and officers, and I know that it's been led certainly by Joanne, and now the new appointments of Scott as well. So really, I'm really pleased about this, and I think there's no doubt about it. We are leading the way in Wales at the moment. I know the Minister have made that clear. The Commissioner have said that as well. So obviously everybody's looking at of what we're achieving. And I think that there's no doubt about it. When we started on this road, it was hard because obviously we had to have capital investment. And in the Cabinet at that particular time, they agreed when I went to them with this sort of £1.5 million, which is not easy to get that type of capital. They agreed it. Fortunately for us, the Regional Partnership Board was sort of on board with this. And out of all the homes that you've seen in the report, we've managed to have finance from the ICF funding. And I think we've had the bulk of that funding, to be perfectly honest, over the years. You know, there's £6 million of capital, and I think there's £16 million of revenue. And Newport have taken the lion's share of that. And as Sally quite rightly mentioned, a lot of the authorities, they felt that during the times of austerity, they got rid of a lot of their residential homes. We were steadfast in that, and we said no way, we were going to go forward. And I think when you look at some of the comments on there, I think part of the wording we're using is cuts, and I'd like to name all the whether it's Rosedale, Rose Cottage, Windmill Farm. I'd like to add to the word cuts to all that. So it's Rosedale cuts, Rose Cottage cuts, because it's right in the report. It's not just about bringing them home. It's about the language we use. And when I was talking to the officer at the time when we were talking about this and when we were going to do it, some of the language that the independent sector was using was totally inappropriate. These are homes now. These children are coming there for to be loved and coached and show what is happening. What I would like to say that if you looked at page 17. Now, I know Cambridge House, I think even if we weren't embarking on this, I think it's something like Cambridge House is not ideal. Can you imagine you as a young child walking up there and being taken from your family and looking at Cambridge House? It's almost like something out of Psycho, isn't it, really? It would really frighten a lot of children. Even though the warmth and everything was inside it, it's not an ideal building. Look at the new buildings that we've developed now at the moment. They're absolutely superb. And I think it's even Oakdale, sorry, the Rusbite home as well. We've got such a wonderful story to tell, to be perfectly honest. And Windmill Farm, I think, is the cherry on the cake. There's no question about that. And I think when we started embarking on this, there was a big fight in the council. Then let's make no bones about it. I had to fight really hard to get that funding for that, because that was going to be sold and it was going to go straight into the capital pot. And I think by being steadfast and making clear that we were going to do something different in Newport, which we've done, and I think that's working with health and everybody else, I think we've achieved great things. And I think we're not going to stop here. There's no doubt about it. I think when we have the wherefore to even come up with new ideas as well, those children, we're corporate parents and we've got to look after them. We shouldn't just send them off elsewhere. We should look after them ourselves. I understand that clearly we can't look after all the children. There are some children clearly in more secure environment that have to be, but what we can do is bring those that we can bring home. Let's bring them home. And if the last point I like to make, if you look at all the success stories, and it's not all about getting the GCSEs and the education, you see one child there that he didn't even go to school, but now he's back in Newport, he's doing 3 and 4. So those small steps are giants for that young lad. And I think it's all credit to all the officers, certainly through the pandemic and COVID. They've worked extremely hard in these homes, and I take my hat off to everybody. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul, for those words. We have questions from Stephen Marshall first.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can see me and hear me. I know my system's a bit odd today. I see you nodding, so that's a good sign there. Seeing my mug this time in the morning. My question mostly is, well, to start off on a thank you for obviously a good positive report. It's always good to know that we're leading the way, and it's really, really good there with Sally and the team. My question really is the provision in place sufficient to the needs that we hold for the young people that we have registered? I think it's about 300 odd on the books all in all. I think like 328 or something like that. And Sally, I know, will correct me if I'm wrong on that. And what provision do we have in place in terms of the facilitating those with varying needs? What point do we then have to say, actually, we can't administer to them? As much as we'd like to administer to all, obviously there's going to be some with certain disabilities, and I'm assuming some mental health capacities that we wouldn't necessarily be able to support with the Newport. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Councillor Marshall. So currently it's 368, so that's where we are today, which is has been a very steady figure as the total number of children who we have looked after and in our care. The vast majority of children in our care will be in foster care. So I think many of you will be aware is that we have, in parallel with the work on residential care, done a very big piece of work in recruiting our own foster carers, again, to try to ensure that we're able to provide that service in Newport and with carers who can meet the quality needs that we absolutely insist on for our children. So the number of children who we would be looking to care for in residential care will always be small. The current position is that we at the moment have, I think it's 20 children who are in out of authority residential care. That number has come down significantly. Some of those are in provision that we are unable currently to provide. And you mentioned, Councillor Marshall, disabled children. We have a very small group of children that we don't currently in Newport or indeed in Gwent have the kind of provision that is able to meet their needs. And there are ongoing discussions with the Health Board to look at something about how we might consider doing providing a regional model for that group of children, because again, currently they are placed away from their home authorities. We also have a position where we at any one time usually have 1 or 2 placements, what called mother and baby or parent and child placements. And those are very specialist placements, which again, we're not able to provide locally currently. It is constantly on the agenda as something that we look at, and those of you who are on corporate parenting may remember it's one of the areas that we're going to look at in terms of mother and baby fostering going forward as an area of development for us. So I suppose the answer to your question is that I think currently we are probably close to the ceiling of what we need in terms of residential care for Newport. I'm sure Joe and Scott would correct me if they felt that was wrong. I think we're not far off that. It is a very difficult one to call because we frequently have emergencies. Monday night this week, I get a phone call at 10 o'clock for emergency duty. They've got an 11-year-old girl and nowhere for her to go. So what do we do? So there is this constant balance because our placements are always full and yet we have no emergency capacity. And you'll have seen in the report, Rosedale Annexes will hopefully be an attempt to address that emergency capacity issue. I think at the moment I feel confident with where we are, the developments that we've got in place, that in order to meet the Newport need, we are probably getting close to the point that we're there. Does that mean that we're going to take our foot off the accelerator and not consider what else we will do? Absolutely no, it doesn't. There are those specific areas around disabled children or family placements that we will want to consider. Emergency placements is a really big challenge for us. But also very occasionally, and again, Councillor Marshall, you touched on this, we do have children whose emotional wellbeing and mental health, for example, means they need a sole placement. And they struggle in foster care. So again, we have a couple of children in that position at the moment, and those are areas we will continue to look at. I think Joe and Scott would feel very relieved to hear. I don't think we will be looking probably in the next 18 months, 2 years, at any further big developments, but we will continue to look at what we've got and are we able to meet our needs. And I think for another day, it's traffic outside the Civic, sorry, for another day, I think one of the things that we're really trying to do is make sure that both our foster care and our residential care does exactly what Councillor Marshall says and is able to meet the needs of our children without going to external providers. I think that answers your question as far as I can.
Do you have a supplement?
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Trevor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. Two things really. Project Perthyn, is it? Are we now completed that project? And if not, what are we going to do? The other thing is concerned as regards to Oaklands. Reading the report, I see you have 2 children there permanently or whatever for a long term, and obviously I'm assuming this actually affects the respite situation. So how are you managing that, and is this going to be a short term or a long term?
Okay, so first part of the question, Perthyn, is that this is very much an ongoing project for us. So obviously we've looked at the upgrade works for Forest Lodge, for the work that we've done with Rose Cottage, Rosedale, Bringlass and Oaklands, and we're now working on Windmill Farm. I suppose, going back to my previous answer, we will keep looking at what are the areas we need to develop, what do we need to improve, are we in line with best practice across England and Wales and so on. So I think for me this is very much a project which is about how we see our children's homes, and Councillor Cochrane touched on this in terms of it's not just about the actual homes, it's how we train our staff, it's how we support our staff. Again, I'm sure all on this call will be aware is that the past 18 months has taken a very heavy toll on residential staff. And whilst adult social care has been the focus of much of that, children's social care has also suffered. So Project Perthyn is about the whole of our residential care and the thinking going forward. Scott, who's our team manager for children's residential care, this is very much Project Perthyn is what he does, is he develops, he continues to look at what we're doing. So it's not finished. It's very much about how we continue to work in this area and how we do the best we can. I suppose the next question is, will it ever finish? And I think probably in a sense, no is the answer to that, because we will continue to have children in our care. And I think we will therefore continue to always want to look at the best ways and to learn for how we provide care. I think that that's really important. In terms of Oaklands, the last 18 months have been really grim in terms of short breaks and respite care. We obviously had a period really early on in the pandemic when we were really struggling in terms of how do we provide short breaks safely for children, and obviously very often children with quite significant vulnerability in terms of their own health. The 2 children who are there currently are there temporarily. We have got work in place. They have quite significant needs of their own, and there are a number of issues still outstanding in terms of their long-term care. but we are hoping that they will be moving on in November, and we will then be back up to full occupancy with Oaklands. What we have done in the interim, because obviously the past 18 months has been a real challenge for families, many families with disabled children, in terms of the pressure on their families, we have increased some of the other arrangements that we have in place. I think probably it has still been a struggle, but so for example, we've increased the range of direct payments that we make in order to support families in slightly different ways to look at it rather than a respite arrangement. But nonetheless, we have missed those beds, and I think come November it will be a really welcome moment when we're able to go back to a full occupancy at Oaklands. So it's on its way, but it has been a challenge this year, those two little ones.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor?
Yes, please, if I may. Would you be looking at another place, another building in regards to respite care? Being that we've been struggling in the pandemic, and I'm assuming that there are a number of children within the city that possibly could do with that respite care.
And we are looking constantly at models of respite care. So we are looking with our disabled children's team about what else. We do commission other respite care. So for example, we use T-Havan on occasion. So we use for a couple of children, we regularly use T-Havan. And so for example, over the summer, we had additional space at T-Havan for children who required that. And that's a very particular specialist provision, as you're probably aware, for palliative care for children. We also use, for example, we have a couple of children who are placed in schools away from Newport, and they sometimes provide respite care. And sometimes it's better for children to have that respite care in that setting because it's where they're familiar. So we do that. And we also have foster care as a respite arrangement for some children, where we're able to, for example, match a child with a foster carer who's got specialist skills in relation to disability or the physical health or the emotional well-being needs of that child. We have one particular very strong arrangement for a very young child who has a chronic kidney condition, and we've been able to match her with a respite carer, and she's able to go there very regularly. So we try to look at what's best for the child and their family. It is an area that's under constant review. I'm also aware that I'm a part of a number of discussions that are looking at some potential regional provision in relation to increased respite provision. I think we have some reservations about that in terms of the plans, but again, it's something we very much would want to be part of the discussions going forward. Those are in collaboration with the Nile and Bevan Health Board. I think it's unlikely that we would look at another Oaklands as such. I think what we would be more interested in doing is exploring all those other options, because different children and different families require different things. So it's trying to look at, we've got Oaklands as one particular model, which absolutely works fantastically for some, but for other children, for other types of care, we need something a bit different, and that's what we try to do.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to thank Sally, the team, and Councillor Cochrane for the hard work and outstanding work which they've done over the pandemic. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Trevor. You just did thank them. Thank you. Councillor Forsey, please.
Good morning. Thank you for an excellent report on excellent work, and I think this really is something absolutely to be proud of, and to hear that we're leading the way in Wales is really tremendous achievement. I think it's so important that our children are looked after, really cared for in the area where they live, rather than being sent out of county. I wanted to ask about the opening date for Windmill Farm, and it's so nice in the report to see the pictures and see how things are progressing. And as was mentioned earlier, we went to see Windmill Farm when it was rather dilapidated, shall we say, and now from the pictures it looks like there's been tremendous progress there. So I don't know if there is an opportunity. I know it's been, you know, difficult in these circumstances, but but it looks like really great progress, and I would like to hear about when it's opening, please.
I think, Councillor Forsyth, it's probably best if I hand over to Joe and Scott, who would be able to share that information with you.
I know Scott is part of the project team on this, so I think he'd be really good to give an update of the real finer details of what's going on. If you're okay with that, Scott?
Yeah, sure. First of all, good morning all, and thank you for the positive feedback to date on children's services. It's really refreshing to hear, and thank you for your continued support. With regards to Windmill Farm, I meet weekly as part of an operations group, and then I meet monthly as part of the project group, which then feeds into board. We are currently on schedule with the build. The build is due to be completed at the end of December, with the view to us having the keys handed over to us. So I met with the design team last week, and we were started to choose, which was quite a nice meeting. It was choosing the interiors and trying to make it a lovely setting for our young children. For those that have visited the site, what a beautiful environment for our young children to experience and to spend some time ensuring that we provide lots of nurturing and support to them. So yes, so we're due to on track. We've just appointed the home manager this week, which is good. So that's phase 1 of the recruitment. So all being well, we are subject to the winter months and the weather. So hopefully the weather will be on our side, as well as due to the pandemic, there's also continued delays in supplies and materials. But the project group are working tirelessly hard with the builders and the developers to ensure that everything is on track. So hopefully January 2022 is when Windmill Farm will become operational, and we'll be able to provide support to our young children across Gwent.
And I suppose we absolutely will be looking for an opportunity for councillors to be able to visit prior to us opening. As with our other children's homes, we try to avoid too many visits once the children are there, because it's their home. So I think that hopefully we'll be looking in December for you again to be able to visit, to see the development and actually get a really good picture of how it is now, as opposed to then, for those who were able to visit previously. I noticed Councillor Townsend is on this call, and I think we actually shut her in the house when we were there last time. So we'll try very hard not to do that this time.
I was just thinking of that. I was thinking of that, Sally, and it was terrifying. I thought, no, you've gone and left me, and I'll die in the house.
I'm so sorry.
I thought it was a good decision, actually.
We rescued you, so I'm very, very pleased that we were able to get you out. So thank you.
Yes, so was I. Thank you, Sally.
Okay. Do you have any more observations, Councillor Forsyth?
Well, just to say, you know, well done on the progress there, and yeah, I look forward to being able to visit and see what looks from the pictures to be an absolutely wonderful transformation, and I think it'll be a lovely facility. So well done to all involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cleverly, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think my colleagues have mentioned basically the questions I was going to ask, but I'd like to make some comments. It's an excellent report. Well done to Joanne and Scott and the team for doing that. And I agree, the pictures in the report, as they say, every picture tells a story. Comments I wanted to make. I'm pleased that Cambridge House had been closed because it wasn't fit for purpose after the rota visits that myself and Carmel used to do. We also visited Forest Lodge and was it Rose Cottage, which I thought was brilliant. Rose Cottage, a really family atmosphere. And I think this is the way to go, the vision that we've got. I was also pleased to read in the report that you've got a pace bed. As Sally knows, I used to foster care for a remand project where they used to be remanded into our care. So hopefully we might get some more pace beds, because I think it is well needed to take him out of police custody. Also about the respite in Oaklands. Is there a waiting list, Sally? That was the only question I've got.
Joe, you're on mute.
Should I come on to this one? Sorry, I have so many buttons to press. I double clicked myself. Yeah, so at the moment there is a waiting list because we've got these other young children in the placement until November. So there is a bit of a waiting list whilst we sort that out. And we've had to change, you know, people's circumstances have changed during the pandemic in terms of what they need and the requirements are. So at this moment in time there is, and we're trying to match times, dates and the children, because we have to make sure the compatibility is right, because some children don't obviously mix very well. So yeah, so hopefully from November we'll be in a better position and won't have that waiting list. But what we're trying to do, as Sally was saying, was try and for alternatives. So we're trying to do sort of like a domiciliary care type thing, and where, you know, the children be taken out from the family home for a few hours, so the families get a break in a different way, and perhaps they don't have the overnight stays. So we try to look at, you know, different groups or activities they can go through to try and provide that support differently, I suppose. And for some, it's actually working better than having the overnights, and it's trying to be creative with what we've got at the moment.
Excellent, well done. And the other thing I liked, Chair, is that in the report it said about the young people helping to decorate their bedrooms and pick fittings and whatever, which I basically believe in that, on the needs of young people, you know. And I also used to work with the UN Convention on the rights of young people as well, which is really important. Okay, well done, Sally, to your team. Excellent report.
Thank you, Councillor Cleverly. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Tom Suller, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's to Sally it is, please, if I may, Chair.
Yeah.
Sally, congratulations, and I hope other cities are watching the success we're having with the progress we've had over the years, and thank you very much. Sally, with the the children who have mental problems, do we have enough officers or people with experience in that field to cater for them?
I think it's a really good question, Councillor Suller, because it is an area that I think, again, many members will be aware that particularly during the last 18 months, children and young people, what we're seeing now is a real impact on them of the loss of the last 18 months and the losses that have, be that through directly because of illness or the loss of family members, or just because of the loss of everything in their lives in terms of routine and structure and school. So what we were seeing 18 months ago already was generally a population where they do struggle very often, young people. We know the pressures of social media and everything that brings with it, and the pandemic has just exacerbated that. All our residential staff do receive full training, and they have to be trained in line with the regulation from Care Inspector at Wales. I do think that, and I hope Scott would agree, as a relative newcomer to children's services, that we try to go above and beyond with that. And some of that's about the support that we offer for staff, because it is a stressful job. So it is about making sure that they are okay, that they can then deliver the services that address the challenges with children and young people. We've worked very closely with the Gwent Attachment Service, which is provided by the Psychology Service from an Iron Bevan Health Board, and we work closely with them with all of our children's homes to look at the model of care that we offer, to really focus on the needs of the children and how we care for them. I mean, even saying that, obviously the children who are in our care, in our residential care, are inevitably vulnerable and are inevitably troubled. They wouldn't be with us otherwise. So we are often having to look and really fight for some of the resources to meet their emotional well-being and mental health needs. I think, again, very many members will be aware is that there is significant pressure on child and adolescent mental health services across Wales and indeed England, and it is an area of challenge for us. We can't fully compensate for sometimes when we need some of that external help. We do work closely, and I think Windmill Farm is a good example of really trying to bring the two worlds together. So you've got social care and health very much working together, and it's not always easy. Professionally, we do sometimes clash, it's fair to say. And we also sometimes do experience different views. We have different perspectives on things. I think our own staff, I would feel very confident and very proud of what they've brought to the atmosphere, the culture, and how we care and how they respond to our children. Do we need to continue sometimes to fight for increased support, increased care for them? Yes, we do. And that's one of the roles that our staff have to take. So not 100% answer, Councillor Sullers, but I think that's probably what we can offer.
Thank you, Chair. May I ask something else? It's gone from my mind. So you're so interested in what you were saying, Sally. I'll think of it later, okay? Sorry about that.
If it comes back, Councillor Suller, let me know. Councillor Richards, please.
Thank you, Chairman. If I could just add, and others have said the same, congratulations really to Councillor Cochrane and all the members of staff for their dedication and commitment in this area. I've got two sort of questions, they're a bit long-winded, but as a human being listening to your report, what happens to the children in other authorities who are not accommodated in the same way as Newport? I mean, we're basically operating an excellent in-house system, if you like, but what are other authorities still doing with their children who need this type of care? And the second point is out of authority children's care or out of county. I mean, over the years I've been a councillor, I've heard some horrendous finance figures quoted at the cost of what that service requires. We are doing it differently, basically, in Newport. Is there any way you can give us some indication of the cost savings in following our model as opposed to out of county? Because at the end of the day, rightly or wrongly, elected members look at pound note signs. And, you know, we keep referring to that in cost. But as I said, over the time I've been a councillor, I've seen and read some reports, unbelievable figures for out of county costs. I'm sure that in-house is the best way. I mean, in principle it is, but there would be a cost into that. And if we could have some sort of comparison, I know it's difficult, it'd be helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so first part of the question, in terms of other local authorities, so in Wales, the number of local authorities who have their own in-house provision is small. Similarly in England, Caerphilly has some of their own in-house provision, Cardiff does, Bridgend does, and a couple of the North Wales authorities, but the vast majority do not. So whenever they require a residential bed, they have to purchase it and they have to go for out of authority residential. We have in Gwent had some discussions about potentially Newport and Caerphilly considering running some provision for the smaller authorities. We haven't reached that point yet. We do occasionally offer a short-term bed to another local authority. We charge them for it, obviously, we don't overcharge, but we charge them for it. But in essence, the answer to your question is they continue to buy expensive out-of-authority residential beds. I am aware from the heads of children's services is that there is almost a constant scrabble for beds. Almost every week, well, absolutely every week, sometimes more than once a week, there is an email from a desperate head of children's services trying to seek a placement for a teenager. They are in perilous short supply. Some of you may have seen in the media last week, for example, if you're looking for a secure bed, we don't provide secure accommodation, but if we were to, last week across England and Wales, there were 58 children waiting secure accommodation, and those are the most vulnerable children. Those are children who are deemed to be at risk of harm to themselves or others. So you get some indication of the pressure in the system currently is huge. And I suppose, as I said in my introduction, although we haven't completely cracked it, having our own provision doesn't half make this so much easier for us. In addition to the quality, it does take that pressure off us. So that's what other local authorities do. And I think honestly the conversations are this is a very troubled area in terms of placement. So I mean, I'm really grateful for all the praise, and we will feed that back to our staff, but I think we should be very proud as an authority of the actions that we've taken in order to address these issues. In relation to costs, the costs are huge, and you're absolutely right, Councillor Richards. I mean, I've written and I've seen reports with figures. One of the things I want to stress is that providing this in-house is not a cheap option, because we want to provide the best, and we want to provide equality. We want to pay our staff fairly. Obviously, they're on the terms and conditions of other council staff. So that there is a significant cost attached to this, and we need to be realistic about that, is that for the most vulnerable children, just as for the illest people, they access intensive care, our most vulnerable children do end up costing the local authority, and we have to be realistic and honest about that. But nonetheless, most expensive placement that we've ever paid for was £8,000 a week. Now that's us as a local authority. Joe might correct me if there's been one more expensive than that, but I think £8,000 a week is the most expensive we've ever paid for. Other local authorities have paid significantly more. One English local authority at the moment is paying in excess of £30,000 a week for a placement. So we are talking about astronomical sums of money. And whilst there are voluntary sector providers in this area, there are charities who provide care. The majority of this care is provided by private businesses and is traded as an equity. So in terms of the child who cost £8,000 a week, she thankfully was able to come back and come into our own residential care. She was one of the first children that we brought back. And what we calculated the saving for her in 1 year was £300,000. So even accepting that this is an expensive provision and that we are committed to funding it and resourcing it appropriately, the contrast in cost is still there. That is at the more expensive end. Obviously, for the majority of children, it's less than that. So even if you go out of authority, you'll be paying in the region of £3,500 a week. That would be considered at the lower end. But nonetheless, the savings, because obviously many children are more expensive and you are able to bring the savings in. I mean, I think at some point we probably would have done it by now if it hadn't been for the pandemic. I think there is a piece of work for us to do to really get to the bottom of how much those savings are and understand that, because that gives a justification for us to continue to do this in addition to the quality. And I do think possibly that is a piece of work we need to do in the future to do that. But certainly that kind of back of the envelope calculation would tell us absolutely there are savings to be made, even when you still factor in paying for quality. It is a really fraught area in terms of policy and practice for all local authorities. Does that answer the question, Councillor Richards?
Yeah, through the chair. Thank you, Sally, for your honest and detailed answer. And I think those are the type of figures that need to be known to have a sensible discussion about this subject. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Trevor Watkins.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Scott mentioned about the new manager for Windmill Farm. Are staff from Cambridge House being offered positions at Windmill Farm, and if not, are they being offered positions elsewhere?
So just to reassure Councillor Watkins, as a result of the closure of the Cambridge House, we had no compulsory redundancies. We were able to move staff to other children's homes. The manager that we've appointed, I think it's probably safe to say, Scott, is somebody who is already a residential care manager with us. Is it fair to say that out loud? Yes. So we have appointed somebody who is already a known residential manager for us and who is very experienced. But Councillor Watkins, yes, what we have done is we've been able to retain those staff who wish to remain with us, and we have no compulsory redundancies as a result of the closure of Cambridge House.
Excellent. Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Scott.
Okay, Councillor Tom Suller.
Thank you, Chair. I remember my question. It's about to Sally, please, if I may. Again, Chair. Thank you. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yeah, we've got you. coming through.
Sorry, may I speak to Sally, please?
Yes, you, by all means, you ask a question. There she is.
Thank you, Sally. You got a lovely face. May I say that, you know, the children with their education, have we had any really good successes, you know, because it's important that we get the children on the right road to success, even though they're traumatized by the position they're in. Thank you.
I mean, Councillor Cochrane mentioned, didn't he, in his introduction about how children who have missed huge amounts in school and really struggled with education. And one of the really clear things for us is to try to absolutely get our children back into education. Now, for some, that means returning to school and being in school, in mainstream school. For some, that means alternatives. That means perhaps something a little bit more vocational or building up to being in school, so doing it an hour, building up and gradually, but absolutely that is the aim, is to have all of our children in education. We do have some real successes in education this year. The child that I was just mentioning in relation to Councillor Richards, she was successful in obtaining GCSEs, which was fantastic after the period that she'd had, and she's a really bright young woman. So we do have a number of children who go through who are able to do that. This time of year is always quite interesting because we do have children who are looked after who go off to university. And this year we have a looked after child who successfully got a first in his graphic design course in university, which was a fantastic achievement. He's done really, really well, and really proud of, and we are really proud of what he's achieved. I mean, obviously, one of our big aims in residential care is for children to be in education in Newport and working with our colleagues in education. It's not always easy because these are children with disrupted education, but absolutely that's the aim. And sometimes university is obviously a big success, and we've got a couple of children who previously looked after who are now social workers. So we obviously did something right, but I think the other thing is to think of different sorts of successes for children as well, to think about those children who go on to employment, those children who go on to be great parents. There's all sorts of success. And sometimes we have to wait a little while for children who are looked after to catch up. So we have to recognise that. So sometimes we are still supporting children into their early 20s in education to give them that catch-up period. Thank you.
Okay. Tom, you've gone on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry, Chair. It's a question to Sally again, please. I like talking to Sally, even though the others are really good, the officers, I know that. But it's about
yes.
the wider community involved, because we need people, you know, to be good foster carers. And do you think we have enough foster carers?
Okay, so just to pick up on foster care, some of you may have seen last night was the first advert for Foster Wales. It was actually in the adverts for Coronation Street. And I think some of you will have seen me before with the background, which was Foster Wales, Foster Newport. We are currently doing a huge drive. We're about, in fact, I think we went live yesterday with, thanks to some support from Councillor Cochrane, some really good advertising just before you reach the tunnels. So some of you will notice that if you're driving up and down. So we are doing a constant drive. Joe will be Joe manages fostering as well as residential care. So Joe's very much on top of this. We have been able to reduce the number of children in independent fostering agencies this year. And I'm just going to ask Jo quickly, if off the top of the head she knows how many foster carers we've managed to recruit this.
I think it's kind of balanced out, so we've got the same sort of numbers because we've lost a few through different reasons. But we had a real surge last year and beginning of this year, so we've probably had about 20 altogether, but we have lost some, or we've lost some placements because people sort of had 3 children and could only take 2, or different reasons like that, or they've gone on to adopt, or different things. So it's probably about the same. And can I say, for education, one of my big successes in residential, Scots or the teams, is we've got a young person who hasn't worn uniform or been in school for a long time, who's finally this term has gone to school wearing a school uniform. And to me, that is a massively huge success. And all our children in residential are currently in education placements, which has probably the first time in a number of years that we've managed to get to a position where that's happened. So yeah, Scott and the team have done a wonderful job to move things on. And fostering, we're continually trying to recruit and promoting it. You might see, if anyone watches the Newport rugby, we're going to have some we're working with them as well to try and do some recruitment, and you'll see some banners and different things coming up when you start to go into games about Newport fostering or Foster Newport. So that's we're really trying to push and promote, but we always need more. So you can see my background. I've got the background on. I wanted to come on to show you. This is what we're trying to do. So I go to all of my meetings with this in the background to try and promote fostering. We need more.
Thank you all. You're doing a grand job. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there anyone else got any questions? I don't see any hands raised, so I shall.
Chair, can I just come in? I said at the start of this is one of the best reports I've had in the 30+ years, and I by all the comments from all the members and officers' replies, you can see why I made that comment.
Thank you, Councillor Cochrane. Your comments are duly noted. I've got a few comments just to make. I thank members for their contributions first off, and officers for their answers. I like the way the whole ethos is changing. The whole language of care is changing. And it is about putting the arm around people and saying it's going to be okay. So Kutch is a great product to be using, and to have that attached, I think that's genius. That's genius. I know that we work with our staff on trauma training, but I would like to see a list of all the training our staff achieve and to what level as well, so we understand how they conform to the trade training and what they're trained in. So if we could look at that. Also, I note that we have many projects coming on, and hopefully in the future. And how are we working with the local communities in being good neighbours to all the communities that we work within? That's a vital part of the success. It's mentioned quite eloquently about the costs, and I know that the 80 million is probably one of the most outrageous figures that we would hear, and the 3,500 is probably where we're at, or somewhere in between those. But when you look at costs, can you bear in mind the long-term cost of not providing care in-house at home here in Newport? Because if you don't provide it here, there's going to be a knock-on effect further down the line with costs. I hope that joint working will bring various kinds of abilities and disabilities into the system. I'm sad that we cannot provide that service yet, and I wish that we make as much progress as fast as we can to have an inclusive approach to care, and not having to be not inclusive. And I'm going to leave that there. So there's just a few things here, but overall a very positive report, very positive and enthusiastic presentation, and I thank you for it. Okay, we're going to move on now. Okay, we happy to move on? Are we all happy to move on? Yes, I guess we are. Okay, so let me go to where I am. Item 6, pages 31 to 84, the Director of Social Services Report 20 to 2021. Okay, and the introducing person is, who's introducing this, please? Okay.
I'm happy to introduce it, Chair. I don't know if Councillor Cochrane wants to contribute as well. Chris
Yes.
Humphrey.
Morning. Yes, sorry, Chris.
Morning.
I was looking for you and these papers round, you know.
That's right.
Welcome.
So, yeah, this is this is a hard act to follow. The children's report is very uplifting, but this report is the Director of Social Services report for 2020-21. So, as you'll be aware, this is a statutory requirement that we produce an annual report of the Director of Social Services. And of course, as we all will understand, 2020-21 was a very challenging year for all of us. So there's a lot of information, kind of essentially very much the kind of the theme running, the thread running through that year was how we coped with the pandemic and how we managed to keep services going, and how, but you know, as you've just heard from Children's Services, not only did we manage to keep services running, and we also managed to achieve quite a lot as well, which is remarkable in the circumstances. So there's a lot of information in the report in terms of our performance. Just to sort of note that the performance reporting system was in the process of changing during that period of time, but was suspended because of the pandemic, which is why some of the kind of the detail is not fully available, because our reporting requirements changed. So we haven't been able to include the kind of some of the historic measures because they've all been altered, but I can explain more detail if members need on that. And then I think it's just a case of, you know, if anybody's got any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, does anybody have, let's go through the report, shall we? Page by page. Okay, right. Page 39. And please feel free to put your hand up and stop me, committee. Page 39. Page 40. Page 41. Page 42. Page 43. Page 44. Page 45. Can I say, Chris, we've just picked up a new reporting. It's come to us for the first time. It's sat elsewhere. And I note we have no benchmarking, but surely there must have been, have there ever been figures kept over the last years that we could have used just as a template to benchmark, oh, not benchmark, but to look against?
If I may, Chair, the challenge is that how the information was reported was changed. So the reporting requirements from Welsh Government changed. So it's a bit, what we do have all of that data, obviously, and we still use that information, but it would be difficult because you're not comparing like with like. So, for example, for adult services, we had 1,538 adult assessments that reported, whereas in the previous year we had over 3,000, and that's because we were only allowed in the new reporting framework to count brand new assessments. In other words,
people who are new to adult services, not those who'd been in contact with us previously. So although if you use the same measure, we actually did over 5,000 assessments, but we were only able to report on 1,500 of them. So that just gives you an illustration of it's quite difficult to compare. But we do have all of that we still collect all that information, but it's what we're allowed to report on to Welsh Government that is provided in the report, if that makes sense.
It does me. I suppose somewhere along the line, but it's very hard for the scrutiny committee to hold account when we're holding nothing to account because there's nothing there to show us.
Yeah, I understand. But as I say, when the Social Services and Wellbeing Act was introduced, the whole of the reporting performance framework has changed. They realised that a lot of the previous measures were not giving them the information that they wanted, so they've changed them all. So we've had to change all of our reporting frameworks as well.
So next time we will have benchmark reports.
Yeah. Yeah.
Chair, can I piggyback off your question? It's Councillor Marshall.
Yes, of course you can, Councillor Marshall.
Thank you. Just with those new assessments, there was an increase as mentioned there, Chris. Just wondering what type of things we're being assessed for. What is the breakdown of things that we are assessing on, please?
Okay, so you talk about adult services principally, Councillor Marshall. Yes. So the main people who kind of come to us for an adult assessment, quite a significant number of those are wanting assessment by occupational therapy. It's usually about between 30 and 40%. The other big cohort of people are people wanting assessment for care and support. Sometimes at the point that they contact us, they obviously don't know what support they might need. So it's up to us to sort of work with them and their families to work out what care and support they need. So that could be domiciliary care in the community. It could be respite care, as we've discussed earlier for adults, or it could be that they are at a point where they may need residential care. But those are the two big cohorts of people. It's kind of care and support needs and also quite a significant number for occupational therapy. And obviously in the majority of people approaching us for an assessment are older people, but there are people obviously adults of working age as well, whether it's because of physical disability or learning disability or indeed mental health. Just to note that the number of people that we are assessing with mental health difficulties has increased by about a third during the period that we're reporting on, and some of that as a consequence of the pandemic and deterioration of people's mental well-being, and also a significant number of people presenting to us with kind of early onset dementia and dementia that had previously, if you like, been sort of manageable, but a whole load of combination of factors linked to the pandemic and social isolation and so on meant that things were no longer manageable for people. So that just gives you a sort of an idea of some of the people that are coming to us.
Thank you, Chris. And if the chair allows, with the mental health, obviously you said a third of the new assessments are of mental health. Would that pose a challenge?
Sorry, Councillor, we've had an increase in a third, by a third in the number of mental health assessments.
Apologies. Does that prove a challenge for the service in any way moving forward? Because obviously the services and the mental health provisions, obviously we know with CAMS for children, it's normally quite a long delay. Is that going to be something that we will see further challenging us in the future with mental health services?
Yes, I think it is. Presents a considerable challenge, and of course we have responsibilities. You know, we have to provide a sort of 7-day week, 24-hour approved mental health duty rota, so that if someone needs to be sectioned under the Mental Health Act, we have to respond to that on a 24/7 basis, and out of hours that's delivered through partnership with other local authorities in Gwent, and Caerphilly Council or the host for that out of hours service. But we do find that our in-house mental health team are often working late into the evening. So and also there's quite a shortage of suitably qualified people. So we've made a commitment in Newport that we train up at least sort of 3 or 4 people every year to be able to sort of take on those duties. But what we find is that quite often once people are qualified, often they're kind of they move to other local authorities, so that it's a constant. But we've made that commitment because it's just better to have those staff and to sort of be feeding the system, if you want to describe it in that way, than not have them. But it is a service that's under constant pressure. Yeah.
Thank you again. If the chair will allow me to further digress on a point just raised there, obviously the mention of staff is a big issue throughout, and I get that. With what you've just said there, with obviously being trained and near enough poached by other local authorities, let's face it, it's poaching. What are they basically offering that we're not to be able to try and retain?
Well, some obviously local authorities, and of course where we're positioned, so we might lose people over the bridge, or we might lose people in the other direction to Cardiff. There is, as things currently stand, there is no national pay scale for staff in local authorities for social workers, and so you do get there's quite a range of different pay scales, and at the moment, particularly around social workers and AMPs, as we call them, approved mental health practitioners, some local authorities are offering incentives for people to join them. Yeah, so it's challenging, really, but that's the moment. As I say, you know, some local authorities are offering kind of golden hellos to suitably qualified staff at the moment, so it is quite challenging. Having said that, we have got a good reputation as an employer for and we do have reasonably good success in recruiting when we're able to, but and we also have very good retention of staff. We have quite low turnover of staff in our teams, which is a really positive thing. So once we get staff, we're usually able to keep them. But obviously, you know, inevitably, you know, you're going to lose some staff if they're going to get significantly more money elsewhere. And that on that subject, that's proving a huge challenge at the moment in terms of the domiciliary care world, where, as I'm sure people are aware, the hourly rate that's being offered in hospitality and retail at the moment is presenting quite a big challenge to our colleagues in some of the domiciliary care agencies to try and recruit and retain staff. And that's one of our biggest pressures at the moment.
Okay, thank you. For those 5 people who were listening avidly at home to this conversation this morning, you mentioned about people presenting themselves with early onset dementia. Could you explain that? Did they come through via the GP or via any other agency, or do they also just present themselves?
Well, often it's usually either sort of family members, or it would be other professionals that are referring them in to us for assessment. Yes, so it's not always. Sometimes it is the person themselves. They're starting to struggle and they're recognising that, but more usually it's other professionals or their wider family members referring them in.
Thank you. And I suppose it's recognisable that we're seeing a rise in this type of degenerative illness. But however, what is the rise in Newport? Do we have any figure of how it's going now and the projections?
Do you mean dementia particularly, Chair?
Yeah, let's deal with dementia.
Yeah, I haven't got that figure to hand, but I can certainly go and find that out for you if that would be helpful.
Yes, and in general, how are things presenting? What's the future like, and what are we doing to offset it? Because I know that we're losing staff to, as you said, wonderful golden hellos, and I don't like that, especially in the workforce here. I know we're losing staff to the hospitality because they're paying more wages. Well, we may have to find a way to benchmark up as well. So how do you see that current picture, Chris?
I think in terms of the kind of the demand at the moment, I think what we're seeing is a very significant demand at the front, as what we call our kind of front door. Mm-hmm. But also it's not just numbers, it's also the complexity of people's needs, because people have, for a whole range of reasons, perhaps waited longer before they are approaching us for help. And that's been reported in the press as well, is that people are presenting later to health services because they've been sort of sitting on problems for longer, so they've deteriorated. So people's needs are much more complex at the moment when they contact us. In terms of staffing, there's a lot of meetings and discussions happening, not sort of within Gwent, but also with Welsh Government about what we're going to do to meet this challenge, because it's a very in Newport we've sort of we're coping, but in some other parts of Gwent and certainly other parts of Wales, they're very much struggling with the workforce, but we are sort of just about coping at the moment. As people will know, we're currently still able to offer a £1 an hour uplift from what's called the COVID fund from Welsh Government, and that will continue until the end of March 2022. And so conversations are happening about, well, what happens after that, in terms of, because there was a commitment to the new living wage, but I suppose the question is, will the new living wage still be enough? Or will we have to look at, the future of how we fund domiciliary care? So, and just to add, that even areas, some parts of Wales have got a more significant in-house domiciliary care service than we have in Newport. But even their in-house services, which obviously are able to offer better terms and conditions, are still struggling to recruit. So that's just sort of give you an indication of it. It's something that's been widely reported, isn't it? So it's not news to anyone that we are struggling to recruit staff.
No, it isn't. And finally, on this issue, what's our current relationship with the health boards? Are we, with regards to joint working regarding packages of care and various other bits and pieces? Because as we grow, as the demand grows, it grows not just for us, but it grows for our other services around us that help to support us. So what's our relationship like these days?
Well, I think the relationship is obviously we spend very considerable amounts of my time talking to and working with colleagues in an Iron Bev and Health Board, I think they've got their own very significant workforce pressures as well at the moment. And as we know, it's been again reported on the news about, their ambulance services are struggling, aren't they? And so WAST is struggling in terms of their demands. But I think there's quite a lot of pressure at the moment in terms of hospital discharge, partly because of kind of workforce pressures, because I think they've got a lot of workforce absence and also vacancies. We've also got quite a number of residential care homes that are now back in what we call incident in terms of COVID, so they've got cases. So they're not able to accept new placements, although the booster jabs have started to be rolled out this week, which is really positive. But I think, this sort of going back to the report, obviously this report was kind of the last year, but some of the pressures of COVID haven't gone away. We're still dealing with that very significant aftermath, both from a workforce point of view in terms of capacity, but also, the supporting our health colleagues with the pressures, the very significant pressures that they're under as well.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much indeed. As we continue down page 45, colleagues, Youth Justice Service is next. Any comments on page 45? 46.
Sorry, Chair, I wanted to speak on page 45. I did put my hand up.
Did you? I can't. Your hand isn't showing as if it's up yet.
There's quite a few hands showing on my page.
Oh, sorry. Yes, you are absolutely right. In actual fact, I do apologise. It's we haven't had other side technical issues here this side myself this morning. I don't know what's going on sometimes here. Okay. So, just a second, Jan. Just a second, please. Paul, are you quite happy to wait to the end? Paul Councillor Cochrane.
Yeah, that's fine, Chair.
Is that okay? Because you'll sum up everything then. Okay. Councillor Cleverly, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My question on the Youth Justice Service is about the community payback system. I can understand with the lockdown and pandemic, everything was stopped, but is there a possibility that's starting up?
Yeah, I don't know if Sally's on the call, because she's probably do you
want me to come in on that? So,
please.
So, well, to be honest, not much stopped, if I'm honest. We, I suppose in common with lots of bits of adult and children's services, we did actually keep an awful lot of things going. And one of the things that was part of that was trying to think of different ways of doing community payback. So rather than the more traditional ways, which would have been really quite difficult given social distancing and all the strictures that were in place, some of the things that they did do right at the beginning, so this would be back going March, April, May 2020, was that we had groups of young people putting together, they were called Pamper Packs, which then went to NHS staff in particular, and those were really welcome. So those were done in collaboration with, it was then Royal Gwent, obviously subsequently the Grange, and those were specific, just little things, a little chocolate, some toiletries, just a little kind of spoil you pack that young people helped put together and we got donations for. And the other thing that we did was that they also did a lot of friendship bracelets that you do with embroidery thread that very often we did some work making those and then exchanging those with vulnerable people and looking at ways to work them, so those were done. We've also done quite a bit of work during this period to move away from that traditional, I think what could be seen as quite degrading sort of litter pick type stuff, which is just like, oh, important, but nonetheless, so to try to get something which is more meaningful in terms of those community schemes, and they've been quite successful in doing that. And we took on an allotment, so we've now got an allotment, and we've linked that in with the food bank. So I mean, I think they've been a bit optimistic in their first year, but maybe in their second year of production there will be more veg that would be able to go in. So trying to find different ways to do it. So so it didn't stop, it changed really. And I think in some ways that change longer term is a positive change, because they're things that will hopefully help young people to get more understanding of other people. It's a big ask to ask young people to develop empathy, but that's something you're trying to do basically. Is that okay?
I like the idea of the allotment. I used to run a youth allotment for 5 years, so that's excellent. And then we used to come for the projects.
Well, if anybody's got any plants that they want to donate, I think they'd be really grateful. So please think on that one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you,
Councillor Marshall, please. Sounds like somebody's playing the comb and paper in the background. It's probably Councillor Marshall. He is having problems with his...
Chair, excuse me. I think that's my background, because I've got men doing the kitchen, putting in a new kitchen, and they're using drills, and it's horrendous. I can hardly hear anything, so I do apologise.
That's okay. Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, if you can hear me, I did right at the bottom. My question was a piggyback off yours. Apologies, I'm still having issues with my system.
That's okay, don't worry, it's okay. Councillor Townsend, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Chris, it seems a little way back now, but you mentioned about the reporting mechanism for from Welsh Government, or changing the system. Why do they do that?
Oh, you'd have to ask them. No, I think they felt that it's obviously important to be able to make comparisons between, well, from their point of view. Firstly, to sort of understand how the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, in terms of a piece of legislation, was having real impacts, because it was one of the biggest pieces of legislation that the Welsh Government had ever implemented. And I think it's also very much about being able to sort of make sure that they can make comparisons across different local authorities and measure us, not against each other, but, you know, make those comparisons. So I think it's about making sure that everyone maybe counts things in slightly different ways. It sounds straightforward, but, you know, as I mentioned earlier, what is a new referral? You know, is it someone who's approaching social services for the very first time, or is it someone who's previously contacted us 2 or 3 times? So it's making sure that we are all counting things in the same way. So they've learnt from the first kind of 2 or 3 years of you know, the measures, and actually have revisited them. And they did a significant piece of work. It's probably about 2 years ago now. It was all ready to be implemented, and then we went into COVID, so it was put on hold, because quite rightly they determined that, you know, we needed to focus our attention elsewhere. I think some of the measures didn't really make any sense. A good example was that they measured the average age of someone moving into a care home. But what does that tell you if you're measuring it for everyone over the age of 18? Because if you know, the vast majority of people moving into a care home will be over the age of 70, say. But if you have someone who's you know, 32, that's going to completely throw your numbers out, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of learning from the first set of measures, and actually trying to make them more relevant and comparable.
Okay, thanks, Chris. One just final question, Chris. You mentioned about the people being trained at Newport and then moving on. is it too undemocratic to have a proviso that these people remain with the authority for a year, having been trained by that authority?
Yeah, I mean, the issue is that the funding for the training comes from Welsh Government. So, I mean, if we were paying for the training, then often we do have a sort of if you like, a kind of a tying clause that you know, you have to stay for, I think it's up to 2 years. But if the training is national training, then obviously we don't have that same. We can't really, you know, do that.
Yeah.
Because it's being funded centrally.
And they can just move from authority to authority. All right, thanks very much, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Forsey, please.
Thank you. I wanted to refer to page 39 of the report, and that talks about the number of street homeless that have been accommodated. And it says here 70 street homeless have been housed. But I thought previously the estimates of number of people homeless were about 28. So where have all these other, you know, how come we've housed another 42? Do we have an estimate of the number of people who are currently homeless? And what are the challenges to being able to find housing for them or get them into housing, please?
I think looking at the numbers, yeah, I think I'd have to check that, because I think there are different definitions, because obviously the count is not done by social services, it's done by our colleagues in housing, because that's where it's recorded. So I'd have to double check those figures with them. But my understanding is that it's the differential between people who are, if you like, permanently, actually Councillor Cochrane is very knowledgeable about this area, he'd probably correct me in a minute, people who are technically homeless, but could be what was known as kind of sofa surfing or something. You know, they might be staying with people, and people who are actually sleeping on the street. So I need to just check if that figure is people who are actually physically on the street or people who are technically homeless. But to answer your other question, in terms of, there is a significant challenge in finding people permanent accommodation, just in terms of the number of what accommodation is currently available. I mean, I have to say that through the pandemic and through the efforts of colleagues in housing, social services and our housing support teams, a huge effort and, you know, a lot of partnership working as well with the voluntary sector to make sure that we were able to move people into accommodation and keep them safe. So it was a massive, massive effort across a number of different teams and services. Now the challenge will be trying to convert some of that into, you know, permanent solutions for people and permanent accommodation, but also dealing with some of the challenges that, you know, resulted in them being in that predicament in the first place. Obviously, drug and alcohol challenges being a significant area that we work on very, very closely and lead on in Newport, because we're the kind of the host authority for the Gwent Drug and Alcohol Service. So it's been a significant effort, and it's now about trying to make that into a permanent arrangement. But yeah, I can check the numbers for you.
If I can just come back in on a couple of points there. I was wondering whether the COVID had an effect on homelessness, and perhaps if somebody was sofa surfing, then when there was lockdown, then you might say to a friend, well, you can stay here a couple of nights. And when COVID came along, maybe a lot of these people said, oh, actually, you're going here, there and everywhere. I don't want you coming in. And the other point was that I wanted to clarify really, that all of the people who are currently homeless have been offered, have been made an offer of accommodation, but they've declined it for presumably relating to some of those challenges that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah,
it's correct.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think a lot of people in sort of rather precarious arrangements, informal arrangements, as it were, you know, they weren't able to continue with those. So there was a lot of people who resented on the back of COVID, and I think it's fair to say that there are still a smallish number of people who are still, members will be aware, still are, you know, we're aware that they were homeless in the community, but all of those people are known to our services. Some of them are known very, very well. They will all have been offered accommodation, but a whole range of very complex reasons have either not been able to remain in the accommodation that they've been placed in, or have declined it. And it, you know, for a lot of very complex reasons, but all of the people who are we're familiar with who are homeless will have been offered accommodation.
I just think that we've managed to home 70 people is an absolutely tremendous effort. And also I understand that some people have been housed twice.
Yeah, or more.
Yeah. Or more, really.
Or more. Mm.
Yeah, well, that is a very difficult situation to deal with, isn't it, really? I don't think you can possibly do any more if they've been offered accommodation several times.
Yeah.
It's very difficult, unless they wish to engage. It's really difficult to see how you can progress from there. So I just wanted to say, you know, well done on the housing 70 people, because you know, that is a tremendous effort, isn't it? So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tom Sala.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Chris, please, for me. Chris, it's something ought to be done, really, you know, for people who are trained, and we take the time to train them and they leave. So we've got to talk to all governments to say, look, this is not on. Can you please say that they must have a 2-year period while they stay with us, because it's very valuable. And the question I'd like to ask is, my dear sister, excuse me, she got dementia. Excuse me, Chair.
Okay, take
Okay,
a second.
okay.
I'll come back to you now.
You know, the training is very complex, and it's sad to lose the training of people who have training with dementia.
Mm.
So it's got to stop. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And I mean, before Chris comes back in, I can assure you that knowing Chris Humphreys and her team, as I do, they do take significant time, and all the team, in training, not just for dementia, but as we're looking at dementia now. And we face significant challenges, but we are, make no mistake about it, going to hold you to account to make sure you face those challenges, Chris. But would you like to say anything to Councillor Sutter?
I think in terms of, funnily enough, I was listening to Sally and Joe and Scott earlier about their kind of what they're doing in children's services, which is significant, and it's amazing journey they've been on. And I think we've been on a similar journey in adult services around support for people with dementia, because it's something that we, I know that the Cabinet member feels very strongly about, and it's something that we, our in-house care homes, as Scott will know as well, are increasingly provide specialist provision and support for people with dementia. People will be aware of the changes that we've made to our in-house day services, and support for older people, and in particular people with dementia, is something that we will be increasingly focusing on and specialising in, and providing respite and sitting support for carers of people with dementia, which is really, really important. And we've provided a lot of specialist training for our staff, but also improved and changed the physical environments of our care homes as well, to make them as suitable as we can for people with dementia. So I think that is a journey that we've been on, almost a kind of a parallel journey with services for dementia, which I think is something that we can be proud of as well.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Councillor Trevor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. It's to Chris, really. Well, Welsh Government have agreed tentatively to accept 50 families from Afghanistan. And Newport City Council getting involved in regards to the relocation of that, and what challenges do you think that you're going to find?
Sally's probably more at the kind of the sharp end of that, if she's still available, because I think there's been, I think we've continued to provide support for refugee families throughout, but in terms of the latest developments, I think Sally's kind of got more information on that.
Is it okay if I come in, Chair? Is that okay?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Okay. So I don't know the specifics of the resettlement programme, because those sit with the partnerships team and the staff there. We're kind of on the edges of it, because obviously there are often vulnerable children involved, and we then become involved with families. So we're kind of there and thereabouts, but not in the middle of it. In relation to the current proposals in terms of families coming out of Afghanistan, obviously what Newport as a council is doing is committing to support families as we can and as appropriate. But in terms of the actual families that we are taking, I don't know that. We can find that out for you with no problem. What we are doing in children's is that we've done a very big emphasis on supporting unaccompanied asylum seeking children, which is a very particular group. And we do anticipate seeing an increasing number of children arriving from Afghanistan who will arrive at the ports, basically. You probably will have seen in the media that over the summer there was a huge increase in the number of people arriving, and that has proved a real challenge for Kent in particular, where the children arrive, and there are now a number of children being cared for by the Home Office themselves in hotels, which is far from desirable. So we are doing some work to look at how we can offer accommodation and support for those children. That is funded by the Home Office, so there wouldn't be a financial implication for the local authority. But picking up on Chris's point, we still have to staff it. So there are issues there. So two things in relation to the families. I think that's information that we can come back to you with. That's no problem. We can find that out, the specifics. And then at some point, if you'd like us to present some of the work we're doing around unaccompanied asylum seeking children, we'd be really happy to do. In fact, I think we might be on one of the agendas for November to present that work anyway. So we'll be with you at some point to give you further detail about that.
Yeah, may you make a comment, please?
Excellent. Thank you, Sally, and thank you, Chris.
Sorry, Trevor.
Okay, just to thank you both.
Councillor Watkins, supplementary first. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to hear those, work programs of what is going to be done. And if it is in November, then excellent. If not, could we have it, brought on fairly quickly?
Can I just thank you, Watkins. Can I just remind all people who presented today, if you're going to circulate information to one member, it goes to all the members of the committee. Thank you. Before I come to you, Tom, Councillor Marshall has waited patiently, then we'll bring you back in, Tom. Councillor Marshall.
Yeah.
That's fine, Chair. I do have a number of questions, so I don't know if you want to bring in Councillor Suller before me.
That's very kind. Okay. Councillor Suller.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, yeah, I just said about the importance of getting governments on board. Perhaps we'd like that. Perhaps we could have a government minister here at these meetings and explain the situation which we're in. Thank you. Would you have that recorded, please? Thank you.
Yes, a member will. That will go down in the records, Tom. We'll get that put down for you. Councillor Marshall, please.
Thank you very much. I had a few questions, so please bear with me. The first one, obviously, is working through COVID. I know I asked this a few times when I see both Chris and Sally there. Just basically about looking at the ways of working. Can you please advise the committee how you've maybe had to adapt in providing services? You know, whether or not this has improved any productivity, lost productivity, or what kind of effects has it had on user experience? And I would add, if that's okay, to one that Sally may be able to answer, is what's the situation with the courts? I knew there was initial issues, and what is the situation like now in that position, please? Thank you.
Shall I start with the ways of working, and then Sally can add to it and talk about the courts. In terms of ways of working, obviously, a lot of our, I would say that the vast majority of our staff have had to continue to work very much as kind of business as usual, because they are in kind of front-facing roles. The differences are that they've had to adapt to obviously COVID restrictions and regulations in terms of where appropriate, wearing PPE and socially distancing, etc., etc. Staff are some of our kind of, if you like, our frontline operational teams are spending less time in the office and more time working from home, doing sort of office duties that they would normally be doing in the office. So writing up notes and things like that is what I'm talking about. But what we've also found with our front-facing teams, our kind of social worker and occupational therapy teams, is that we are now supporting them to spend more time in the office, because what we've found is that over a period of time, some of the work that they are dealing with requires quite a lot of support from their manager and from their colleagues. So it's that kind of debriefing part of the work that's important, because some of the work that we're facing is very traumatic, actually, and distressing. And we need to have that face-to-face contact with our colleagues and our managers. We've also, but I think there's also been sort of greater flexibility, and one of the things that has been a positive is you notice that the figures in terms of our safeguarding activity, it's been easier to coordinate and manage some kind of strategy meetings and other types of meetings by doing them as we're meeting now via Teams and other systems. It's been more efficient to actually get people together rather than physically have to pull people together to have a strategy discussion. So that's been much more effective, and it's improved our performance quite significantly. In terms of some of our face-to-face services, such as day services, obviously our in-house services, in common with a lot of our commissioned day services, stopped for a period of time to keep people safe. We have to remember that we didn't have in the early days, we didn't have some of the measures that we now have to stop the spread of COVID, such as vaccinations being the principal one, but also PPE and so on. So most of those services now have resumed. Some of them are being delivered in a different way, so more of a kind of a hybrid way. So rather than go back to a building sort of 5 days a week, people spend some of the week in a building, but the rest of the week maybe out in the community and doing different activities. And that's worked really, really well. And our feedback is that's how people would like their service to continue to be delivered. So we're working with that. So I think there's been a lot of learning. I think it's accelerated some of the more it's been a more efficient use of people's time often, because you don't less traveling to face-to-face meetings, more sort of dropping in and out and doing things remotely. But I think the important thing is that people do need to actually, what we call kind of spend time working collaboratively with each other. So one of the examples is, you know, in our kind of what we call our first contact team, which is our front door, sometimes a team are kind of in the office and you may slightly overhear a conversation that someone else is having with someone else on the phone. You're thinking, oh, hang on, I know a bit about that person. I've seen that person before. I'll pick up that referral. So those sort of informal exchanges we've lost, and we want to bring some of that back because it actually helps the team to work in a more efficient way. I don't know if Sal wants to come in and add anything to that.
I mean, I agree with Chris, is just in terms of the ways of working, we had to adapt really quickly. But the harsh reality, as we've said repeatedly, is that in children and adult services, there was no choice. Just as bus drivers had to keep driving buses and supermarket workers had to keep stocking the shelves, we had to keep doing our jobs. There wasn't a choice in that. You can't stop running children's homes. You can't stop going into people's homes who need personal care. So all the way through, we've continued to do that. I do think there are areas of work in children's, like in adults, where we've been able to adapt some things. So, for example, I've seen some fantastic examples of social workers communicating with children using technology, using WhatsApp, using stories, which has been great. And we, like in adults, we've seen a superb increase in professional attendance at child protection conferences, child protection reviews. We've moved just recently to delivering those in a hybrid model. So we've been trying that since early August, and that's working really well. So we now have the family, the chair of the conference and the social worker in, but the professionals are all on the screen, and that's working really effectively. And I think we will continue to do that, because for example, a paediatrician in the Grange, it's much more realistic for them to be able to do that like this than to have to come down to the Civic or us all crepes up there and so on. But for families, what we found is that they have missed out on that communication and that face-to-face, so we need to do that. I do think for staff, what we're seeing is staff who for 18 months, they are worn out, I think, across the board. And we are seeing that in all areas of children's services. We are doing all sorts of things to try to bolster and to keep our staff going, but the reality is we're just going into winter, and you know, it does worry me about the impact on staff and about how we care and nurture for them. We've got to keep them safe, but they also need face-to-face contact with each other, as well as very high expectations from us in terms of visiting children and families and across the age spectrum. So yeah, I mean, I think it's been an extraordinary 18 months, but I think we have continued to deliver services as best we can under some really straitened circumstances. I just wanted to pick up Councillor Marshall's points about the courts. So right at the beginning of the pandemic, all the courts were moved online in terms of family proceedings. Some will be aware that criminal proceedings ceased altogether, but in family courts, everything went very quickly online. And we did have struggles with some of the platforms that were being used. And it has continued to be difficult in terms of some of the ways that we've had to interact with the court. There are advantages. We no longer have social workers spending days and days just sat in the courtroom because they're able to go in and out as we are here, and that is an advantage, and we'd like to see that continue. But I know from a judicial perspective, they feel quite strongly about trying to get people back into court. For some hearings, we are back in. So, for example, if a family need interpreters or there's a high degree of advocacy, we are back into court and we are making in-person appearances. And for some parents, it is much easier to be in the court to hear and understand what's going on. So it is, again, a mixed approach is what we're seeing currently. Across England and Wales, there are enormous challenges across the court. Just to give you one example, this time last year, we were seeing 54.8% of cases in family law across England and Wales were completing in under 26 weeks. 26 weeks is what you're aiming for in family law to try to get cases resolved quickly for families. We're now seeing only 38.6% of cases are resolving in 26 weeks. And if you think of a child, in a child's life, every week adds up. So that week's tally is really important in terms of delay. And those delays are happening just because it takes longer to do hearings and because there have been some real challenges with, for example, assessments. So the average wait now for children in court is 34.9 weeks. That's not a Newport figure, that's England and Wales, but it is nonetheless very significant. I think in terms of our own court position, I think it is of enormous credit to staff that the way that they've worked is that this time last year we had 38. We'd issued on 38 cases in the court. Now we've only issued at this point 28. So we've seen a reduction in the number of cases that we've got in the family court. I do think, echoing Chris's point, the complexity of some of those cases is stark. And I know that, it feels like a lifetime sometimes in social care. Some of what I'm hearing now and some of the evidence that I'm reading in family cases, it just shocks to the core. It's the only way to describe it. And that is really traumatic for staff as well. So I think we have to bear in mind what we're seeing as families and children living this, and then we see our staff having to witness and bear account of this. I think the court situation isn't going to ease quickly. We know that in public law it's really challenging, but in private law it's even worse. So in private law, what we're seeing waits now that are stripping and going into a year, 18 months plus, just as they are in the criminal court. So there are real challenges in the court world. There aren't enough judges, there aren't enough sitting days, and then there aren't enough barristers, solicitors, or indeed officers of CAFCAS and CAFCAS Cymru. In England, CAFCAS have instituted what they call their emergency protocol, where they're not even allocating some work. We're not at that position in Wales, but it is nonetheless extremely concerning. I think we have a great legal team in Newport. We work really well with our solicitors and colleagues, obviously under the auspices of Gareth Price's leadership. But it is, I think, it's going to be some months before we're back on an even keel in terms of court work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Councillor Marshall, do you have anything else to add?
Yes, I've got a few other questions, but I'd thank Sally, obviously, and Chris for their answers. And it's obviously something to mention. I was going to pick up about the burnout and the workload of staff, so that's one thing. Please keep us apprised if there's anything that we can, basically look into that may be of some support in some ways. And please advise that we do appreciate the work very much so, and heavily state that for us. Another question I've got is, obviously we're seeing situation of the Grange Hospital at the moment where 2 hospitals is now down to 1. Is there anything that we as a local authority can do in terms of social services to avoid A, people going into A&E, or B, like on the back of the ambulances? I know the social services do ward walks and things like that there, but it's a very precarious situation where people are waiting on the back of ambulances and the paramedics themselves are changing over shifts on the back of an ambulance. So it's quite a stark situation we find ourselves in, and just seeing if we as a local authority are doing anything or if we could do anything.
Yes, I can answer that, Chair. Newport is the host for a Gwent-wide regional service, which is funded through transformation funding, called Home First. So we provide staff. We have staffing teams 7 days a week, which sit at the front door. In other words, A&E of the three main acute hospitals in Gwent, so Neville Hall, the Grange and the Royal Gwent. So the focus of those staff is to, if people kind of present at the hospital, who then the medical teams determine actually don't need to be admitted for medical reasons, they make sure that those people are able to return home safely. So they may have, for example, one of the most common reasons for presenting in hospital is following a fall. So they make sure that the people, if they're not injured and they can go back home, then we would follow them up with visit from some of our reablement staff to make sure that the reason they've fallen is dealt with and sorted out, whether it's, you know, a trip hazard or whether it's a kind of a, you know, they need some reablement because they're kind of not able to manage the stairs or steps or whatever it may be. So those reasons for are dealt with. So that happens, as I say, 7 days a week, and that service has been in place for over 2 years now. And when we opened when the Grange Hospital was opened at the end of November, we expanded the service. So we also have that service available at the front door of the Grange. We are also, there was a pilot that was done, again, a kind of a regional pilot to have access to social work advice from WAS, from the ambulance service, so that they could determine, say, if someone had kind of a care and support package, whether say if they needed, they wanted to know when the carers were due to come into that person, so that it was safe to leave them, because obviously their protocols are, is it safe to leave the person at home? But if they knew that a carer was due to come in within the next half an hour, for example, or could even come in a bit more quickly, can we contact the agency, then they would feel confident to leave that person at home and not transport them to hospital. So there's a lot of work happening with WAST and with the hospitals to make sure that we are supporting people to not be transported to hospital, and if they are transported to hospital, to be able to return home safely. So that's a big piece of work that we're involved in. But as we all have heard on the news, you know, it continues to be a big challenge. But we're doing everything we can to support colleagues in Nira and Bevan to make sure that, you know, people don't have to spend a long time waiting in ambulances at the front door of the hospitals, because none of us want that to be the situation.
That's great, Chris. Thank you very much there. It's good to obviously hear that. I know the ward walks were a thing, and it's nice to hear obviously that we are trying to assist it in other ways as authority. I do have 3 more, if that's okay, on there, and I can see the chair smiling because he probably knows me by now, but there we are. The next one was just generally in relation about the complaints. Obviously, there was a number of complaints then, just about what the nature of what the complaints were for, and what lessons have been learned from said complaints, please.
Okay. Obviously, there's a range of complaints across children and adult services. Quite often, certainly from an adult's point of view, and Sam may want to add some comments from a children's perspective. Often you know, I would say kind of a lot of complaints are about kind of, certainly in adults, about kind of managing people's expectations. Sometimes it's about they're not happy with the quality of the service that they've been provided with. Sometimes they're not happy with the outcome of some of the decisions that we're making. You know, their perception is is different to what their kind of the needs and the outcomes they're seeking to, and sometimes it's about their understanding of what we are able to provide, because I think some people think that we have wider powers, and we actually have to do things that they are seeking. So the majority of complaints, as you can see from the report, are dealt with at the earliest opportunity before they, and there's very few progress any further to stage 2 or even to the ombudsman. So I think we do our best to sort of deal with people's concerns and complaints as quickly as possible. And I suppose the other comment I'd make is that if you consider the amount of people that we are working with and the amount of services that we're providing, it's still a, you know, happily a relatively low number of complaints that we get.
Sorry, Chris, I thought you finished. Please finish.
No, that's fine. I've finished. I don't know if Sally wants to add anything, because from a children's perspective.
Councillor Marshall, if we could go through, because I know that you're so enthusiastic with your questions, you've run many pages ahead, and I guess that can be confusing for other members of the committee, and sometimes, but obviously not for the officers. They seem to know everything. So if we could pick up from where we were, Stephen, please jump back in then. Is that okay?
That's fine. I had 2 other questions out of the way fairly easy, but they're kind of, I come in because obviously we had already lost where we were, so it's just joining in.
Well, no, it was okay. So we got talking back to number 39. What I want to do at this stage, this is why I want to stop on page 45, which is where the bulk of the questions before you went on and asked about the complaint system, is I know there's been a lot of lengthy questions, and with the best will in the world, I would certainly have for the cabinet member to sum up everything. So, Paul, would you like to say something at this moment in time, or are you still content to wait to the end?
Chair, I'd like to add a few things if I can, if you don't mind, and certainly there's a lot of questions being asked today, and I think there's certainly been some very good answers, and really only some of the things I just like to add first is that because I'll have to be going soon. One is first of all, I'd like to thank Chris, really, to be perfectly honest, because Chris has stepped in at the last minute to be the interim director of social service. And I'm not saying it's something that she wanted to do when she came to Newport. She came as head of service, but she's done a sterling work in that, and I want to thank her for that. I also want to thank Jenny Jenkins, really, for helping putting this report together. So that's the first thing. I think when we talked about the last report about children's service in residential, it was a very positive thing, and I think this report as well is positive, but obviously it gives us the warts and all of the pressures and everything with social services. And I think there was lots of things that being spoken about today. It was about the performance indicators. Some of those performance indicators by Welsh Government is comparing some authorities against the other. And I think sometimes an example of that, I think, is DFGs, where when not all authorities start from the same starting place. And I'll give you an example where we were sort of, as soon as someone comes in for a request for a disabled facilities grant, as soon as that phone call is taken, that's when we start the clock running. Other authorities only started looking at DFGs when the actual occupational therapist went into the home. Now, so some of these indicators are not fair. There was some, and some of them were silly. Some of them were saying, when a child that comes into care, within a week or 2, they've got to see a dentist. And if that doesn't happen, the indicators are marked out. But that child could have gone to the dentist a week before they come into care. Do you mean? So these are some of the silly things that are happening. When we mention about the golden hellos, some authorities now are offering £6,000 for a social worker to go and work that authority. That's big money, that is, for someone that is struggling. And I know we are looking at some work that, and I know Tom mentioned it as well, about what can we do about that. But I know we're looking at making it clear to some people, if they come in the authority, and I think we're trying to finance it ourselves, that they will actually stay for the authority for up to 2 years. So I know we are looking at that. The challenge is, I think, there's no doubt about it, staff, major staffing issues, certainly with the dom care. And I think the statistics I've had, I think it's within 3 months, 40% leave. You know, who are there's many people in this room on this meeting here, only would do the work that they're doing for £10 an hour. You know, it's peanuts. We're abusing people almost in what we're paying them. And I think that's something that's got to be looked at, and everybody shies away from it. But if we want to pay for care, we've got to all tip into our pockets and make sure that we're paying those at the front end that are doing most of the work. But I think the issue I really have a big bone of contention with is health, the funding of health compared to the funding for social services. Health can overspend and they're normally bailed out. Social services, we can't go over our budget. There's no question about it. That's what we got. All the local authorities got to run, and they can't run at the deficit. So we've got to come on target or close to. So that's one of the biggest issues I have, and the pressure is on social services. You know, we said whether it's national or regional, everyone talks about health. All right, they're starting to talk about social services at the moment, but if you haven't got a positive, very good social services in your area, then you will start putting a lot of pressure on health. And pressure of health at the moment clearly is about moving people out of hospital, but you've got to have the social services network there to support those people. And we're all seeing what's happening in primary care. We've got to look at primary care. How often so many people, and it's coming to the press now and on TV, but you can't see a doctor properly. You've got to see it on the telephone. You've got to send them an email. You've got to send them a picture. You know, I'll give you an example. My wife phoned the doctor the other day. She was 54th in the queue. Now what they're saying now clearly is so many people are going to casualty now because they can't see a doctor. These are all things that sometimes they're out of our remit, and not a lot we can do about it. Last 2 points I'd just like to make as well is on homelessness. I know that Yvonne mentioned about homelessness, and I think it was right to raise those things. And when you think about all those people were offered, there's no question about it. It's really good work. But it's no good just finding people are flat, is it? Because a lot of these people need support. You know, we know alcohol and mental health is going through the roof. And really, it's about having floating support. So when someone is in a home, we need that floating support. And I know supporting people are doing some great work on that to try and help them. And the last point I'd like to make is that we talk about complaints, and there's a big bugbear with me. We raise about complaints, and I look at the compliments. There's only 19 compliments. Now, I think what we're not good at as a local authority, and this is across the authority, people don't record all the compliments that come in for all the good work that we do, whether it's social services, whether it's housing, whether it's street scene, you name it. We're not very good at recording the compliments, and I think the compliments will certainly outweigh some of the complaints we're having. So I think it's an excellent report. It's showing everything what's happening in social services. It's one of those areas where it's expensive to implement social services for so many few people. But I'm said that they're the most vulnerable in our society. If we lose that, I said we're all going down the wrong path. So thank you, Chair, for giving me that opportunity. And
that's okay. We're only halfway through the report, and I hope you're going to be able to stay to the end. And so far, we've got stuck into the report. We're going to go on from page 45, okay, guys? So 46, 47. I know we've covered some of these. 48, 49. And jump in, Councillor Marshall, when you need to. 50, 51, 52.
Chair, am I able to ask my questions, because I do have to shoot off. I did put it in the chat.
Yes, you did. I was listening to Paul rather than following the chat. So they have to do too, you know. It was very engaging. Yes, you can. What page are you referred into, though?
2 seconds. It's towards the back end of it, Chair. Where was it? Sorry, 2 seconds.
Because,
trying to get my tablet.
Chair, if I may, Councillor Richards, I've got to leave as well. I did say to you at the start of the meeting.
You did, John, and absolutely right. You said at 12 o'clock you were going.
On as long as I could. I got to go to a meeting at the school.
Do you have anything to ask before you go?
Nothing at all. Compliment everything I've heard this morning and the way you've chaired the meeting.
Thank you. It's very kind of you.
Thank you, Chair.
I'm going to record that compliment with Paul Hopkins of the compliments.
That goes to 20 now, not 19.
Sorry, Chair, can you hear me? Sorry, I disappeared there. I said I'm still having issues. If I could just ask you, Chair, because I'm having difficulties trying to retrack it. It's basically the one question was in relation to the 28 young people noted that within 12 months of leaving care that they were deemed homeless. What are the reasons for that and what work has been done to support the young people? And then the other question is, what are we doing to further Newport being a dementia-friendly city, please? Thank you.
Okay. Chris, Sally?
I'm happy to take the question in relation to young people being homeless. Okay, so one of the things for us is that that 28 young people, it can be just one night. So it's not that we've got 28 young people who are homeless at all of the time. It's literally that they can have had one night, for example, in a B&B, and that will count as homelessness within the way that we have to report to Welsh Government for this group of children and young people. I mean, the reality, I think as Councillor Marshall and indeed all of you know, is that for this group of young people, sustaining what happens after leaving our care, particularly if they've become looked after as adolescents. So, for example, they have a family breakdown at 14 or 15. They then come into our care. What we can offer them is quite limited at that point in terms of reparative work. And so then to support them in accommodation can be very challenging. Some will be aware that there has recently been a letter to all local authorities for housing and social services in relation to how do we support care leavers. We already in Newport have a number of schemes which are linked to supported accommodation, but what we're doing is working with ourselves and housing colleagues to have a more strategic approach to what we offer. I mean, Chris, obviously, in response to Councillor Forsey's question, picked up on the pandemic has had a particular impact in this area because now of the lack of suitable accommodation for young care leavers. We do work with private landlords and registered social landlords, but it is a really challenging area. So the first thing is just to confirm that we work very hard with this group. All young people leaving our care have a personal advisor and a social worker, and they now, since changes from Welsh Government led by the Children's Commissioner, have that support up until the age of 25. For anybody who's had a teenage child or knows a teenage child, your average 18, 19, 20-year-old doesn't always want to have that engagement. And one of the things is working with them to incentivise and make sure that they stay engaged with us, because they don't always want to. So it's trying to kind of battle with that. So I suppose just in summary, answering the question is that there is significant support put in, and we are trying to build alternative ways to offer different forms. So, for example, shared housing, which again, you know, most young people don't go into a single person flat at 18 or 19. They perhaps live with friends. So it's trying to build those models of support. We've also recently, for those who are at corporate parenting, we've extended how we manage children leaving foster care to be able to support them to remain with their foster carers for a much longer period with them the When I'm Ready scheme. So that's a really good addition in terms of trying to prevent homelessness for young people. So I think the number is 28, and that's not acceptable, but it will very often be just 1 or 2 nights for each of those young people. We don't have any young people who are long-term homeless. The other category that come into that is that if a young person is in police custody overnight, that counts as homeless. So that also can be a challenge in terms of the data. So I think interrogating it further would be useful, but it's also recognising that there is a great deal of work in this area with ourselves and our housing colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. I didn't doubt that for a moment there. I think it's just the way it's put down on there. It's not specifically clear, so it's nice to hear the breakdown of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Richard. We're going to continue now from page 51.
Excuse me, Chair, just about the dementia-friendly city, there's a, as I know we're limited for time, there's a brief update on page 69 about Newport Transport being the first bus company in Wales to actually become dementia-friendly. Obviously, some of the work has not progressed as quickly as we would want it to for COVID-related reasons and the restrictions, but I'm happy to provide a further update for the if that's helpful for the committee.
Yes, it is indeed.
Chair, can I just come in on that? Obviously, I chair the dementia-friendly committee, and we are a dementia-friendly city. And I think there's regular meetings. I think nearly every fortnight now with Natasha, who is the lead officer, and it's really quite successful actually. So we are doing a lot of work really in these committee meetings.
Councillor Cochrane, how would you? I mean, I guess we strive to be a dementia-friendly city. We strive to be, and it's okay saying at committees we're striving to be. How many members of the city council would understand what dementia-friendly is really about? We know the name, we know the aims and objectives. So maybe we could start as members to begin with. I mean, I'm right to say have a seminar on how to be dementia friendly, but I guess I'm going to say let's have a seminar on how to be dementia friendly. What is it? What does it mean? So we can be fully inclusive as a dementia friendly council from the members' perspective. Yeah. That would be a great thing going forward, would it not?
Well, leave it with me. I'll see what we can do. But a lot of people on that committee are the Alzheimer's Society. There are care workers. There's residential home. So there's lots there. I take your point about members, but obviously when we put seminars, we expect members to turn up as well. Mine, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I know.
Through the chair. Yeah. Can I ask the cabinet member as well, if that's okay, Councillor Cochrane? So, when you're having meetings and stuff, is it okay for members to be sent out like bulletins or highlights a bit more? Because it'd be really positive to hear how we as members in our communities can be, you know, like the kind of foghorn, or well, I say foghorn, but the kind of speaker of, you know, the organisations, and to kind of link it both ways. Because as you know, linked in with St John, we are a basically dementia-friendly charity ourselves. Locally, but it's nice to know which local groups and how to become, you know, facilitate local groups as well would be quite nice if that's possible. Thank you.
I'll raise it in the next meeting and see how we can facilitate all this, Mr. Chair.
You are very kind. Thank you very much indeed. Chris, do you want to say anything else on this issue?
Yeah, yes, we've noted that, Chair. That's fine. We can take that away.
Thank you. So 51, 52, page 53, 54. Yes, check in. 55, 56, anything 58. All the things we've covered earlier on.
I'll go 57, Chair.
Okay, please. Yes.
It's a bullet point in regards to in 2020-21, permanent and stable futures were secured by 26 children through adoption. How many are actually waiting in total, do we know?
Yes, we do know, and I'm really glad you asked that question, because at the moment we actually have the lowest number of children waiting for adoption that we've had since I've been here. So actually I get a monthly update from the manager of the adoption service, because as you know, we're part of the South East Wales adoption service that covers Gwent. So every month I get an email with the details, and we currently have 5 children waiting, which is the lowest we've ever had. I think that's credit to SUAS and credit to our own social workers. So again, like everything else through this period, we continued to place children for adoption and worked really hard. So yeah, it's really pleasing that we've just got that 5 coming through. And I know I sign off the matches for adoption. And I know that we've got a couple going to panel this month. What we're seeing is that they're being matched very, very quickly indeed, which is hugely pleasing for children. So yeah, it's a good news story, that very much so. Thank you. Thank you for asking.
Congratulations.
Okay. Any further questions, Councillor Watkins? No? Okay. Page 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, so playing bingo, this isn't it? 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 79. I have a question on 79. I know that we've incurred an underspend in adult community and other areas, and they're quite a significant underspend. And my understanding is that we incurred that because of the COVID grants. Is my understanding correct? First off.
Yes, Chair, that's correct. We had what's been, which badge the so it's from an adult perspective, there's two factors here. One is that we had a significant contribution from Welsh Government towards supporting and sustaining our care services during the pandemic, obviously because of the challenges that they faced and the additional costs of all of the kind of the COVID restrictions, etc. So there was that additional contribution from Welsh Government, and also we also experienced, unfortunately, a reduction in the numbers of people that we were supporting. Because obviously from an adult perspective, a lot of the people that we are supporting are very elderly and very frail. And for example, people are in a nursing home for a reason, aren't they? You don't go into a nursing home because you're fit and healthy and can run a marathon. You go into a nursing home in the first place because you've got a number of health conditions and are often very frail and elderly, or you've got some significant health conditions. So we did lose quite a few people during that COVID, especially in the early stages before we had those protective measures such as vaccines. So that's what contributed to the underspend, Chair.
Okay, I suppose I get, but we are talking about significant amounts of underspend, absolutely significant amounts of underspend. Could we not have invested? I mean, we knew what was coming in. We knew where we were going. We knew where we were going to be underspent. Could we not have utilised that in a better way and said, okay, what we can do is to improve our service or our services?
Yeah, I suppose the challenge is, and we have done this, we have invested the money in where we can. So, for example, we have where it's possible, taken on additional staffing capacity, although it's very difficult to get staff on a short-term basis, but where we've done that. And we've also invested in, used the opportunity. For example, we've upgraded the call system in our internal care homes, because we had to look after a lot more people. We had to be self-isolated in their care, in their own rooms. So we needed to enhance our call system and also provide more one-to-one support for people, both within our in-house homes, but also within our, other care homes. People needed one-to-one support because they're being managed in self-isolation. So where we've used as much resource as we possibly can, but where it is a challenge when it's short-term funding, is that we can't make long-term commitments. The cabinet member referred to, we'd all like to give our kind of domiciliary care staff a permanent uplift in their pay, but we can't make those long-term commitments with short-term funding, and that is a challenge. We have, working with our finance colleagues, been able to commit to increasing in the short term, in the sort of medium term, short to medium term, our staffing capacity. So one of the one consequence of consequence of COVID is that we have quite a few people on maternity leave, and so we've been able to sort of backfill those vacancies and cover those gaps using some of this financial resource, and agree with financial support to extend it into next year, as an example. So we're trying to make best use of those resources as we possibly can, Chair.
Well, maybe the cabinet member can pick up the point at the end, Paul, because we're talking about a £6 million underspend, and that's a significant amount of money. And I hope we're not going to lose that. I hope this is going to be put back in somehow to the service. It's a significant amount of cash. Okay, page 79. Anybody else? I don't see anybody indicating at the moment. Page 80. 81. Okay, and then that's the end of that reporting, I think. Is it? No. Yes, it is indeed. Yes, that's the end of that reporting, I believe. Councillor Cochrane, do you want to sum up?
I just like to take that point about the underspend. It's not as if there's been a bag of money just stuck on the thing and said there's £1.5 million on underspend. I think COVID have made a major impact because of the, I suppose, out of the, it's not a plus side, but obviously money has been flying into the authority, and it's not as if, and I think Chris mentioned about these short-term gains, you just can't go and spend that money like that, because a lot of the pressures really is on staffing. And where do we get staffing? Yeah, you could spend that money, but people want long-term contracts, so it's very difficult for us. And under normal circumstances, you would normally be seeing that would be an overspend in social services, and then other parts of the authority would have to bail us out. So it's not a good thing in some respects when you look at it from a financial side of things about seeing an underspend. But I think you've got to look at the circumstance we were in, and suddenly this money starts coming. If you think about residential homes, a lot of people, there's a lot of vacancies in residential homes where normally we would have been putting people into residential homes, and we can't because of COVID, because they wouldn't accept people. So it's really complicated. It's not as if it's a normal year where suddenly we've got an underspend like it is, and I think it's It's, you know, I would like this every year, because then we could sit down with officers and say, how are we going to spend all this extra money going forward? But I'm telling you now, that won't be like that next year, because it's what we've had from local authority, from Welsh Government, and we were pleased to have that. But it's short term, and none of us would realise by the end of the year what the finance would be. And if you look at it, out of our budget of 60 million, I looked at it, it was about only 2% of that finance, and none of us could run our own budgets at home to come on budget of our wages to spend on our sort of household finances down to 2%. So I think in some respects, when you look at it, it's a large amount, but in percentage terms, I think it's quite low to even come anywhere near that, because how do you spend that sort of 60 million plus and then only come back to a fine figure? Say, we're not like health, as I said earlier on, where they can overspend. We got to come very close to that budget, and it's very hard every year to become close to it. And I can assure you, it's very difficult when you're finding all those things, like community care, as Chris said. We weren't going out to people like we were, and that was difficult, and we were hoping that families were stepping in at the last minute, which they were. That happened greatly through this period of time. So that meant some of these packages of care were being reduced. So all in all, it's not an ideal situation, but you know, the finance is there, and I don't know what we could have done about it. We're in a different year.
I hear what you're saying, Paul, and 10%, 60,000, we're 6 million underspend approximately. 10% of 60,000 is 6 million. Is 6. So 10%.
Sorry, I was talking about 2% of the dealt services. I thought you.
Oh, sorry, I'm looking at it and all as it's presented. And it's not just about staffing. What could the service have done to improve the fabric of what it has to work with? It's not just about the staffing, it's about supporting what we have now, rather than escalating costs going forward. So we could have utilised, I mean, it's okay for me, I'm looking with hindsight, so I wasn't going through the moment. But I guess there has been, for me, a missed opportunity that we could have enhanced somehow without ongoing costs. Something, even the fabric of our buildings and our homes could have been enhanced. That's what I'm getting to, Paul. Not just recruiting staff, because we have a major staff recruitment issue with the shortage of people. Chris.
If I may, Chair, the majority of that underspend, which was in about circa just over 3 million in total, it's not 3 million plus 2 million in children. It's 3 million in total. The majority of it was, if you like, was funding from Welsh Government, which was targeted at supporting the care homes to prevent any collapse in the care home sector, and it was sustaining that sector, because obviously, for obvious reasons, we didn't want to see any homes really, you know, having to close, because they, as Councillor Cochrane references, for quite long periods of time, some of them weren't able to take admissions, they weren't able to take new residents. So it was making sure that we were sustaining that sector, and also the domiciliary care sector. So the money was very specifically targeted in terms of how it had to be spent, and we had to report on it every month, and still continue to report on it every month. So it replaced, if you like, money that we would have otherwise been spending from our budgets into the care sector, but also, as I said, it's very difficult to use that grant money, you know, the budget that we're talking about in a long-term way. As I say, we're not always able to use that underspend to improve kind of capital projects, because there are constraints around it with our treasurers. So yeah, I understand what your meaning is, that we need to make best use of the resources that we have available to us, absolutely, but there are some constraints around it. But also just to say that that position now has already changed and shifted, and we haven't got significant underspends anymore because we're now, you know, back to more business as usual in terms of supporting people with packages and moving people into residential care, although there are still some considerable restraints around that still. But that position has already moved on, because, you know, as I say, that report was now several months ago, wasn't it?
And I think you can't use that money, because that money is basically revenue as opposed to capital.
Exactly.
So we could have used that money to go, and the Welsh government would possibly say, hey, we want that money back if we started spending on that money. So we can't, it was all about that revenue.
Okay. Well, listen, all of you, Sally, yourself, Chris and Paul, and everybody else that contributed to the presentation of the news reports, thank you for taking. I think sometimes the robust scrutiny that's been applied here, the questions, the accolades, the could do betters, the other unforeseen questions, and the honesty that's been applied, I think is refreshing and always refreshing to hear. And can I wish you and the staff well for the future? Just one question, one last question is, I meant to ask you earlier, is I know a lot of our staff, we were saying they support families in family courts, and it's had a very traumatic effect on their personal well-being. How do we, as an authority, and yourself as managers, support those members of staff? How do we do it?
Well, all of our staff, okay, hi. So all of our staff are in teams, and they receive very regular supervision from their manager. That's really important. That's one thing. Yeah. We have throughout the last 18 months done a lot about making sure that communication is open. I send a weekly email to all 370 staff, and that started as a bit of a kind of what's happening with the pandemic, what are the rules we have to follow, and has become a bit of a kind of trying to boost morale. So they've had pictures of my sunflowers, picture of my cat, all sorts of things to try to look at ways, and also asking for communication back. In that email, I every week include something that has been shared with us as a compliment. So I might well include this scrutiny meeting next week as a way of saying that members, you know, had conveyed such thanks and praise to all of Children's Services. But we also have obviously praise from individual families, sometimes from children. So we put those in. I've put children's artwork, all sorts of things. And I was going to stop doing those emails, and then staff told me not to. That could I carry on? So it's become a regular thing. So we have a sort of the formal mechanisms, which are staff supervision, care first. We can, of course, look at buying in additional support if we need to do it. I mean, staff, is part of their training to become social workers, social work assistants, family support workers, occupational therapists. They have some training around this in terms of building resilience. And I think, I mean, Chris touched on it when we were talking about ways of working. One of the things that's been important for us is giving people options in terms of being able to meet up with teams again and have some face-to-face contact. That has been important. And the other thing we have to accept is, particularly in children's, a lot of our staff are young. So in children's social care, social workers tend to be quite young. So they've been working at home, they might have been working from a flat, from an ironing board. So it's trying to make sure that they've got the resources that they need at home to help them with that. We do rely on our legal colleagues to help, so that we've got proper support from both solicitors and barristers. So there's an awful lot about trying to wrap around staff to give them that support. I think there's always more that we can do in that area in terms of how we bring our staff with us. We are viewed as a supportive authority, and Chris mentioned that already, that we're viewed as an authority that has got good mechanisms in place to support our staff. We have very visible management teams. So, I mean, that's something about having an open door and being able, so people are able to communicate with us at any time. And I think that is really important and has been particularly over the past 18 months. So, as I say, a whole range of mechanisms, but that will never stop. We have to keep doing that. We have to keep building and have to keep offering that support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jay, can I just come in on the back of that? I think sometimes this is the difference sometimes with this virtual, isn't it? Because sometimes, certainly with children's social workers, and I suppose with adults as well, sometimes you go into an environment and you need that support when someone can be quite verbal, quite aggressive verbally to you. And I think sometimes it's nice to go back to the office and sit down with a colleague, maybe have a touch or a hug, you know, if you've been really in that situation, and maybe sit down and have a coffee. So obviously some of the staff clearly are coming back now, and I think there's 1 or 2 days, and if they need to come back, there's that open door policy, as Sally just mentioned, about going and having a chat to your colleague just to offload sometimes rather than go into a flat. I don't know whether you agree with that, Sally.
I do, Paul. I absolutely agree with that. I think it's really important that we've got that way that staff do that. They've got to put this somewhere. I mean, there's a term that's used, which is vicarious trauma, and we have to really watch for that. Is that our staff aren't traumatised by some of what they witness and some of what they experience. But I absolutely agree. I think being able to be back in the civic for a little bit of time has been really, really beneficial for a number of our staff in terms of support. And it's just that being able to go sometimes is hugely important, as Councillor Cochrane describes. So, yes.
I think I have to, I mean, in our previous lives, Paul, we both worked in challenging areas, myself in health and you in your role, and we know what it's like when, I mean, we don't know what it's like to work in the COVID situation, that's for sure. This has topped everything, but we know what it's like to be physically, mentally, and otherwise abused. So, so we have an understanding there. There's a mutual understanding of the benefits of looking after the staff who work in traumatic situations. And Sally, can I say, long may you continue your Sally Kutch emails to the staff, to talk a better word, because I like that. That's the word of the day, is Kutch. So there we are. And on that notice, I think I can release you guys back to and thank you all, Chris, Sally, and yourself, Paul, for attending scrutiny this morning, and the answers and questions, or the answers and what you've said in your participation. So thank you both. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye.
Very much. Thanks for your time.
You've done a great job. Thank you.
Right, we're going to move on to item number 7 now, which is the work forward programme. But we can let the other guys go, so except for our committee. So we have the work forward programme. Connor, do you want to say anything here?
Yeah, just before we move on to the forward work programme, have we got any specific conclusions from the last 2 that you'd like me to note and send on?
Committee first.
I've requested with regards to the opportunity to visit Windmill Farm. I know they responded hopefully in December, but we can keep at that. I did note that quite a few members made comments about the quality of the report, that it was a good quality report, to just send on our appreciation. And then with the Director of Social Services report, the question as to the amount of homeless numbers and how they were recorded.
Yes, and also let me go back. I made some notes somewhere. The whole report was positive. Committee, or we questioned on the underspend and we have the answers back for that as well. Because there's a difference between revenue and capital. So and noted it has been a difficult year. We questioned on the how do we measure performances from the past when we have nothing to benchmark up? So they were quizzed on that, and we had the appropriate answers. So I suppose I don't know what other members think.
Well, I would like to support Connor's point about the homeless and really the number of people who have been offered accommodation, the number of people who've been offered accommodation 2 or 3 times, really. And is there an estimate on how many people are currently homeless? And yeah, what a good effort that's been. But if there's any more information available, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yes.
Chair, may I say something, Chair?
Yes, please do, Tom.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe asking them why they left their accommodation, because that's important. Why they left it. Were they happy there, or weren't they? Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Anybody else got anything to add to?
Yes, Chair, I have something to add. There was additional information requested from the last meeting that didn't come forward.
Yes, there was.
Can that be followed up? And there was a number of information required for this in regards to up-to-date information, about Afghanistan refugees when that comes to light. Can members be told about that?
We asked for that. I mean, I think they said that they're going to forward all this information, and I know that again, if they forward to one, they forward to all of us at the same time. So we all get the correct information together.
Agreed. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Have you been able to pick that up, Connor?
Yeah, that's all been noted. It's just the information from the last meeting on the 22nd of June. I think it's just gotten mixed up because I just started, so me and Neil were still in that transitional phase, but I'll get that information for you as soon as I can.
I was about to mention that I think you're doing a sterling job, and it is very early days for this man, and he is doing the best he can. So there we go. You only get that nice approach, but only so long, Mike. Please, you got some people on here that you don't want to. They've been in the block a few times, like myself. But there we go. Okay. Does anybody else have anything to say before we look at this work program? Nope. Okay. So the forward work program.
I've just noted a typo on there. Sorry, on the second one, it should be Thursday, the 30th of November. You will have received invites to a different date for the meeting. I've discussed with Chair at our Chair's briefing and in emails with regards to the need to push the meetings back by 2 weeks, respectively.
Yeah.
So they'll take place now on the date stated. Sorry, Thursday the 16th of November and Thursday the 30th of November, if that's okay with committee.
I think those 2 dates are okay. I don't know why I think they're okay, but I think they're okay with myself. I don't know how they fit with other members.
Okay, we've been Chair if I'm available.
Okay, yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, good with me, thank you. If we can have the calendar invites as soon as possible, that's really helpful to be able to put those in. So yeah. And thank you for all you're doing, Connor. I think you've picked things up extremely quickly, definitely hit the ground running. So good to have your help. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're a lovely boy.
Thank you. Yes, there we are, Tom. A lovely man. And we're all lovely men. We're all lovely men. There we are. So, okay. We've agreed the work program, have we, guys? We're happy, content with that?
Yep. Yes, yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to release you back to your lovely communities, wherever they may be. And I'll see you all again soon. We've now concluded, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. So it's all sorted for tomorrow, okay, Chair? Thank you.
We're all sorted for tomorrow. Happy days. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Connor, do you need to speak to me, or are we?